Dutchman, you got the bus! The hottest band in the world! I'm coming!
Schmack-a-magob, everybody. It's Black Sabbath Sunday, and this is a donation from Mark Daly. And I'm dedicating this episode to his brother who recently passed away, Michael Daly. And Mark asked me to, do a review of the Salt Lake City show, 1984, Ozzy Osbourne. And he told me a story about his brother. He camped overnight to get tickets to that tour. And it was freezing cold where they were at. And luckily, a security guard let him and a bunch of teenagers that were out there camping out overnight to buy tickets to go in to avoid getting hypothermia. So, and I saw the tour as well. I got lucky. I didn't have to stay overnight, though I have done that. I have, back in the day, man, get off my lawn. When people would buy tickets, a lot of times we'd, spend the night, at the door, waiting for them to open. Luckily, I live in Florida, so we wouldn't freeze. And it was glorious, man. We get there early. We get really close seats. And the glorious part about it, front row cost, I don't know, $12.50 or, whatever it was in the 80s. Where the nosebleeds, the very last seat on the tippy top was $12.50. The whole arena was the same price. That was glorious. And before I get into the Salt Lake City review, I want to talk about how I got, and I have told this story before, so forgive me, you're repeating viewers, you're going to have to hear the same story, but some of you may have not heard it. Try to make it as brief as possible, because it is a long-ass story. I had a party in this house when my parents went to Vegas. Me and my brother had this crazy party where, when you go to parties and they blast music on the stereo and stuff, not this party. We actually had a band in the backyard. And I wish I have the pictures. I wish I could have scanned them and show you. And all of a sudden, this big yellow school bus parks in front of my house with full of graffiti, and it said the Ozzy on it. And a bunch of burnout metalheads come piling out. And they were the coolest people ever, man. Drinking. I had trees in the back, and people would be hanging off trees. One dude saw a perfume, and he's like, "Oh, 2% alcohol," and downed it in front of me. I was like, my God, these guys rule. Another dude was all messed up with a cigarette in his mouth, and he was laying on the tile floor on top of their big sheepdog. They had a big sheepdog. They also had a mascot that was a guinea pig that they had in the bus. Anyway, so I know it's a long story. I'll try to make this as brief as possible. So he's on the dog, and I'm looking at him, right? And he's like with a cigarette in his mouth, and the dog's behind him, and he passes out, and he still has a cigarette in his mouth. And then he moves over, and the cigarette burns the dog, and the dog's like, ah, right? And his head just conk right on the tile. Broke it. I mean, didn't break it severely, but enough that it bled a little bit. Had a big ass lump. Well, anyway, the leader of the Ozzyers, the guy that rode the school bus, his name was Sal. That guy was my hero. I saw that guy beat up 3 dudes at the same time. Anyway, so Sal, because the party was so awesome, he made me an Ozzier, an official Ozzier. I was a member of the Ozzier group. And what he did for this Ozzy show with Motley Crue, he stayed up all night, camped out all night, and he bought the whole first row on the right side, and he sold it all to us. So it's a longer story, but I made it kind of brief. And what a show. I saw Motley Crue earlier that day at Peaches, and I got autographs, and I've showed this picture before. If you look at the right corner, that's me holding up the Shout at the Devil album. And what a show. And then, there we are, front row in front of Mick Mars, and then in front of Jakey Lee all night. And it was glorious, man. And, man, both bands were just amazing. Motley Crue was on fire. And Ozzy was in top form that night. And that show, I remember, was postponed, too, because what happened was Ozzy was doing the So Tired video, and a little piece of, when he's standing in front of the mirror, that when the mirror breaks, a little piece of that glass went down his throat, so they had to cancel, postpone a bunch of shows. So it was a postponed show I saw, but it was glorious, and it's exactly like this Salt Lake City video I'm about to show you. Man, I remember, I can't show it to you because of copyright shit, I can give you a little visuals, but I remember vividly, man, having that on videotape because I taped it off MTV, and I would not only play it nonstop at home, I remember going over friends' houses with that VHS tape and slap it on. Something so glorious about the 80s where, man, you can watch, and all you old schoolers know what I mean. You can put on a concert video and just watch it and never get bored of it, never get annoyed of it. Now, we live in an age where so much information is thrown at us that it's hard to concentrate on, you know, a 90-minute concert video. But back then,
20 minutes later.
Sorry about that. That was my friend Bladder. He had to take a piss really bad, so he came to my house to use my bathroom. I'm like, dude, there's a bunch of like trees out there, man. Anyway, so like I was saying, in today's age, there's such a short attention span that nobody can sit, like I'm saying, not other than my generation, can sit and watch a whole concert. Yeah, there are exceptions, I know. Because I'm probably going to get comments saying, well, I'm a young kid and I watch whole concerts. You rule. But, yeah, back then, man, it was like an event. It was like going to a concert, watching a concert on video. It was just amazing. And this show is awesome. It's a really cool show. And for the time, it was awesome because not only you see like the show, but they would throw in little things like in the beginning of Mr. Crowley, there's that graveyard scene, and that's the second song because I wrote the set list here. Even though I know the set list, just not in order. Yeah, so there's a graveyard scene, and then they open with I Don't Know, then Mr. Crowley, then Rock and Roll Rebel, then Bark at the Moon, where they show like picture stills of Ozzy as the werewolf. Then Revelation Mother Earth, which I believe they might have played it in later tours. Like, I mean, I don't know. But I know in the 80s, this was the last tour they played Revelation Mother Earth. And they show a lot of war scenes. And I just thought it blended so cool. And it was just really cool to see, you know, all that war scene stuff going on, that black and white footage to add. It was just like, to me back then, man, that was compelling, man. It was just awesome. And then they do the amazing Steal Away Night. Now, Suicide Solution. Now, I remember, man, a bunch of my friends and me were complaining back then that, you know, here's this hotshot guitar player, Jakey Lee. And his guitar solo wasn't really unaccompanied. It was, you know, the whole band. And he's just up there ripping. It's a great solo, don't get me wrong. But, you know, I mean, we're used to, like, you know, Randy Rhoads would do the solo during Suicide Solution with no band members, you know, unaccompanied. And, you know, then Zakk Wylde. Well, actually, Jakey did it on the Ultimate Centaur. But in this one, he didn't. But I love that part where he, like, stretches his fingers and he's doing that crazy stuff on guitar. And Ozzy's just, like, shaking radically while he's doing the little, you know, little tapping stuff. Just amazing. Jakey Lee's, I mean, yes, he's underrated. He is underrated. My second favorite guitar player in Ozzy. And then they do Journey to the Center of Eternity or Kentre, whatever. I know it was called Forever in other countries. And great tune, you know, and the drum solo. I remember seeing Tommy Aldridge, the first time I saw him was when I saw the Ted Nugent, Pat Travers Scorpions tour, Scream Dream. Was it Crash and Burn? Yeah, it was Crash and Burn and Animal Magnetism, where Tommy Aldridge just blew my mind. I believe that may have been the very first drum solo I ever saw in my life. I could be wrong. But when he throws the sticks and he starts doing his hand thing, like, you know, Bonham did it before him, but it was just amazing, man. I mean, Tommy Aldridge is a beast. And earlier that night, Tommy Lee did a massive drum solo, where he didn't have, like, you know, the little, you know, kitchen sink stuff flying around or flipping around. He just did a drum solo that was just massive. And then they go into Flying High again, Iron Man, Crazy Train, and Paranoid. So it's a great, it is all on here on YouTube, the full show if you want to see it, if you haven't seen it. And hopefully you don't have a short attention span. It's fun. It's still a fun watch because I watched it again. And it was a blast. And there you go. Mark Daly wanted me to review it. And I think it's a great show. I think Ozzy sounds good. You got Bob Daisley on bass, Don Airy on keyboards. And smoking show. Other than the Randy Rhoads Blizzard of Oz show I saw, that was the second best time I saw Ozzy. And I think he was even singing better at that Bark of the Moon show than he was at, the Randy show. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying he sounded so much better and so much... I can't say he was crazier because, man, he might have been the craziest at that Randy show. He was going nuts. He had something to prove, going out on his own, first U.S. tour, Blizzard of Oz tour with Def Leppard. Massive. And oddly enough, I saw that front row as well, but that time I snuck up to front row. Because back then, here's a little trick I did, and I might have said this before. I would go to concerts, and if, let's say I had like 23rd row, I'd get a little white out, and I'd put a little white out over the 2 or 3 instead of 23rd row. It'd be 2nd or 3rd row, and I'd wait. And when the lights go down, you know how you're going to your seat and the security guard's there with the flashlight? I mean, the place is going, the energy's high, people screaming, and the security guard's checking everybody's tickets, and I give him my whiteout ticket, he looks at it, yeah, 2nd row, go ahead. That's how I got all the way up front for the Ozzy show. Anyway, that's it. And again, I want to give my sincerest condolences to Mark Daly for the loss of his brother. My condolences, brother. And rest in peace, Michael Daly. So next week, he donated for 2. Mark Daly's saving Black Sabbath Sunday for a couple weeks. And next week, I'm going to talk about, he wants me to review the Beacon Theater show on the Dehumanizer tour, which I'm basically going to do it like this. I'm going to talk about my experience with the Dehumanizer tour and talk about the Beacon thing. And actually, I watched it, and it's badass. You should watch it out there. Watch that Beacon Theater show or Sunrise Musical Theater, the show I was at. They're both full on YouTube. And I'll talk about that next week. And I have some things to say about that show. Anyway, that's it. Thank you so much, Mark Daly. And if you'd like to donate, I got a PayPal in the description below. And please subscribe to my channel if you have not. So, stay frosty. Listen to Black Sabbath. And smack 'em a gob. Rest in peace, Michael Daly.